Given the agenda, the first order of business is retired Major Charles Dupuy, former Chief of Staff, Louisiana State Police. Good morning, Mr. Dupuy. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate your willingness to come and talk to the committee.
Yes, sir.
The main reason why I wanted the committee wanted to have you testify is because I think it came to our attention in the last meeting or one of the previous meetings that you were the last person to be investigated who was chief of staff by state police itself. Is that correct?
No, sir.
And what do you mean, no, sir?
I was never a target of an investigation. I was
Okay.
a witness, but not a target.
Witness.
Yes, sir.
Because that was the confusion. It was, I think we asked if somebody, and they said that you were, because I think I posed a question to Colonel Davis that it was unusual for me that number 2 would be investigated by chief of staff, by state police itself, and he said it's not unusual, it's happened before. I said when, and then I think he described you as being as part of the investigation, but you were not actually investigated.
I was a witness.
Then it came to my attention too, and maybe you can shed some light on why I have you here. How can IA, an internal investigation, investigate the number 2 person? Do they have really the ability to do so?
Well, I think the question is, in an unclassified position, you serve at the pleasure of who appoints you.
Can you? Yes, it's close to the microphone. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. As an unclassified appointee, you serve at the pleasure of the person who appointed you. Sometimes the governor appoints the lieutenant colonels. Sometimes the colonel appoints lieutenant colonels. So you serve at that pleasure. So you have no appealable rights in an investigation. So if you conducted an investigation and you were sustained on whatever violation, you would have no right to appeal. There would be no body to appeal it to. The rank of major and below are protected classes, and they go in front of the State Police Commission for a hearing. So I don't know how you'd adjudicate that internal investigation.
Right. That's what came to my attention after the last meeting, that it seems like it's almost procedurally impossible to do an IA investigation on somebody that number 2.
Well, the employee wouldn't have the right to appeal. So,
and during your time there, was anybody above the rank of major ever investigated by State Police IA?
not to my knowledge, no.
That's really all the questions we had for you. Is there anybody else who has a question? I'm sorry. Representative Villia has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning.
Good morning.
Just if you can establish for me in terms of, and I assume it hasn't changed, in terms of where is the IA department located in relation to the lieutenant colonel's office within the state police? It's my understanding, is it just right down the hall?
Yes.
Okay. And as I understand, the chief of staff, the number 2, oversees the internal affairs section. Is that correct?
It depends on the superintendent. Under Colonel Edmondson, internal affairs reported to me for anything up to termination. And then they would report to the superintendent because he's the only one who can hire and fire. Other superintendents had internal affairs report directly to them. So I don't know how it's done today.
And I was just going to ask you, do you know under Colonel Lamar Davis with Doug Kane as lieutenant colonel, do you know if there's been any changes in that regard?
No, ma'am, I do not.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We have one question from Representative Marcel.
I should have been listening to Villio's question. She probably asked mine. But let me just be clear. You said that there are protective classes from major down, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And so to be clear, IA cannot investigate the number 2 person. No, they could, but there would be no appealable, no way for them to appeal it. No way for them to punish him. Is that accurate?
I don't know if there's no way to punish him, but he would have no, or she would have no appealable rights because they serve at the pleasure of the appointed authority. So they can be removed for no cause.
Right. So in other words, the colonel could do whatever they want to do with number 2 without even calling for an investigation, right? So
Yes,
there
ma'am.
would be no need, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And just for clarity's sake, do you know how Doug Kane, is he appointed by the governor or is he appointed by Lamar Davis? Do we know that?
I don't know that.
Okay. Representative Bacala.
I just want to continue to ask for some clarification. And when you're talking about the position is non-classified, at-will employee, and obviously, I want to make sure we're clear that if the chief of staff, not you, but a chief of staff committed some act that was not in good taste, let's just say, they could be subject to IA, correct?
Yes.
And they could be, obviously the ability of the appointing person is to demote them back to the rank of major or below, correct?
Yes.
But if you went in as a sergeant and you were promoted to lieutenant colonel as chief of staff, the appointing person, let's just call it the colonel, could demote you to sergeant back where you came from. But then the protections then kick in if they were trying to fire you. That from that position, the rank is not protected by civil service, but the employment is protected by civil service.
If he's put
then
back
you
under-
come back
Yes.
into the realm of being a protected civil service employee for the purpose of disciplinary actions beyond demotion.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure that the committee's clear on that we're the only thing protected or not protected is rank.
That's correct.
Okay. It was asked, but I didn't quite understand the answer. Who reports to who? We talked about, I think you said under Colonel Edmonston, IA reported to the chief of staff.
That's correct.
Under Colonel Reeves, who did IA report to?
I don't know.
And under the current colonel?
I don't know.
Okay, so all we know is that when Colonel Mike Edmonston was ran the state police at that time, IA reported directly to him, but you have no information regarding the chain of command with IA after his tenure.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And I have one last question for you. It's possible, not possible, but you also have the alternative of turning the investigation over to the Attorney General's office, the IG's office, and to any other federal authorities, right?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, we really appreciate it coming. I know it was brief, but it did help clarify a lot for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Colonel Lamar Davis. Good morning, Colonel. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members, Colonel Lamar Davis, Deputy Secretary of Department of Public Safety, Superintendent of State Police.
I wanted to bring you back because I thought the information you gave me last time, I wanted to give you a chance to clarify because I'm not accusing you of anything. I think you probably just misspoke or but I wanted to make sure we had the record straight that this is the, at least in recent memory, Chief of Staff being investigated by A is unusual, correct?
Yes, and again, apparently I was misspoken with regards to saying that Colonel retired Major Dupuy was investigated. It was my understanding at that time, based upon, again, conversations that had been had, and obviously there was a demotion that took place from Chief of Staff to Major. So it was my understanding, based upon that there had been an investigation. To clarify some other things, I will tell you that Internal Affairs does report directly to me, along with operational developments and other administrative sections. The reason why I wanted them reported to me was, one, because of some things that had happened in the past, and two, it's just my leadership philosophy. I'm a hands-on type leader. So with that said, that commander of Internal Affairs under my administration reports directly to me. I sign their leave slips. I do their planning sessions. I set the stage and the tone for which they operate their sections.
What is the timeline? Are there any rules and regulations or procedures as far as when an IA investigation has to start after it's first reported?
Yeah, generally 14 days from the time that a captain or above receives information.
Okay. So this one's past 14 days, though.
Well, and at times that happens because sometimes the incidents occur, and then from there, we're not notified until after the 14 days. So that has happened. And again, that's a guideline. It doesn't exempt us from conducting an investigation. If there is something there that needs to be investigated, that is a timeline, and that will be handled at the commission's level as to determine whether or not we follow procedures based upon the situation. But it does not take away our responsibility to conduct an investigation should there need to be one.
You could see the concern people would have that the chief of staff, who is not on administrative leave and is present every day at state police, is being investigated, and the only person who has any control, and the investigation is reporting to the person who appointed them. Like, you could see that would be troubling for some people.
I can, but one of the things I wanted to establish with this administration, and I've been called into IA on certain investigations to testify, and one of the things I really wanted to establish is that no one is above the policy or the law, and that means that every trooper up to the superintendent is responsible, which means they will be investigated if credible information is brought forward. When we look at not doing that, that breaks trust with you all. That also destroys and erodes trust within the community. If you're asking us to be responsive, to be accountable, then that means we need to be able to investigate and come out with a decision based upon the facts of that particular case. And that's why I saw fit to, one, initiate the investigation. I initiate investigations on other employees. So there's no reason why I can't. That section is reporting directly to me. As you all may have, we've submitted, I think, the paperwork that indicates and shows that that person that's being investigated shall not compromise, interfere with that investigation at all. If I find that they do, then I will take disciplinary measures up to termination.
And I appreciate that. I think from my perspective, I would be more comfortable with an independent investigation into the matter than the person who appointed them. That's just how I see it. But
yes, sir.
Representative Marcel has a question.
Thank you. Thank you for coming back,
Yes, ma'am.
Lieutenant Davis. Colonel Davis, when you were here before, you talked about giving the letter. You gave the letter to Lieutenant Kane, and I think that was the same day that we started these hearings, that he could not speak to. Is that accurate? Because he was under investigation?
I don't know exactly what day in the timeline, but we can.
It was either the day of or really close to the day that we started these hearings, as I remember it, right?
Yes,
and was that an internal affairs investigation?
It is an internal affairs investigation.
And the internal affairs, you just said, reports directly to you. Is that accurate?
Yes, ma'am.
And so this committee, I think you heard from many of us who felt that he should have at least been put on administrative leave, and you said you would look at that. Have you had an opportunity to look at that?
Yes, ma'am. One of the things that I looked at was whether or not it impedes our ability to investigate, whether or not he provides danger to the public or himself. And
but let me stop you right there. And I think you said that before, a danger to the public or himself. We get that. Does that include hindering the investigation by people who are currently still working there, who may want to give information, but because he's in the number 2 spot, they don't want to cross the number 2 man? Do you kind of get where people may feel that way when we have state police troopers who are contacting different ones of us individually, saying things that they feel that he should be removed? They're uncomfortable. You don't take that into consideration, or you don't know that?
Well, you may be getting calls that I'm not getting. One,
I'm sure
two,
we are.
If we are placing him on administrative leave, he's still the number 2, and they still may feel uncomfortable. Again,
but he wouldn't be there. You understand that he would not be present. I
understand, but we look at due process, and due process applies to all, including the chief of staff, including.
And I'm all for due process.
Yes, ma'am.
But I'm also for transparency. And you who appointed him? Was it
I
you?
appointed him.
You appointed him. So you appointed him, and you're going to investigate him, and you're going to make the decision, and you makes the decision to allow him to continue to stay there.
Just like that.
Although there are questions about the things that he knew or should have known surrounding Ronald Greene's death. You think that's...
Ma'am, I'm responsible for every hire that I make, every applicant, every cadet, and as such, I appoint them. And when there's questions about whether it be their integrity, their performance, or their behavior, I take the same approach. And
So would
that's
you object to an outside person doing that investigation?
No, ma'am.
You wouldn't?
No, ma'am.
So instead of IA, we could get someone else to do the investigation of Lieutenant Colonel Kane.
If you would like.
Okay, I think that's something we certainly need to look at because we got the fox watching the hen house. Thank you.
Ma'am, and I get that and I understand your concerns, but I think it's important for us to really have balance. And when we say you want us to be accountable, you want us to be transparent. And when we do that,
And we think that this is a part of the transparency.
when we do that, then if it's not what you all think it should be, then of course it makes it look like we're doing something subversive, and that's not the case.
And I'm not suggesting that you are. What I'm saying is, at this point, you need to eliminate any view that it could possibly be that. If I were in your shoes, I would do everything in my power to make sure that everything was transparent and there was an outside agency looking into this rather than me doing it through IA, which the gentleman just left the table, retired major, saying that IA has never investigated the number 2 person. So if this is unprecedented, why would you want to be the one to do something unprecedented when so much is at stake in terms of transparency, in terms of the people in this state that are looking and they are wanting answers and they want transparency? If I were in your shoes, I would do everything in my power, including allowing him to go on administrative leave. I do believe in due process, but I believe that he should be on administrative leave. And I think you heard that from multiple members of this commission. And it's not just because we think that. There are other citizens around this state that believe that as well. So it's not just us thinking it. And we're not trying to categorize you as being a bad leader, but we just think that you should do more in terms of the transparency that you keep talking about, but we don't see that. And then you have to come back and correct what you said the last time. That's another problem. It's problematic for me. Anyway, I would really love to believe that you're doing everything in your power to get to the bottom of what happened in the Ronald Greene's death, period, and who all was involved, period. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Marcellin. And I have a follow-up question for you. That I'm looking at Chapter 12 from the Commission, Disciplinary Action Removals and Resignations, under IA Administrative Leave Pending Investigations. It says that they have 15 calendar days to provide the employee with such facts that will support the action that are available. So it's been 15 days since the IA investigation has started with Officer Kane. Do we have any facts yet? Where are we on? It seems like this should be concluded by now.
Well, no, sir. When we look at the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights, states that we have, and it was 60 days, but it's been moved to 75 days based upon Police Reform De-Escalation Committee request and implementation, to 75 days to conduct an investigation. And at that point, then either we have a determination and or we can request an additional 60 days, which would go before the commission and be requested for additional 60 days to conduct that investigation. It's 15 days to notify them that we're initiating an investigation. It's not to complete an investigation.
Yeah, but it says you have to give them the facts.
As to what we have at that particular time.
And has that been done?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me ask you this. When do you think this investigation will wrap up? Because I think it's important for my purposes that we're still here and present, because we're definitely going to want the results of it.
Well, again, I don't put investigations other than the mandated timeline, sir. I don't say in 32 days we're going to wrap up. That is determined by our internal affairs section based upon their evidence, what they collect, and their processes. And at that particular time, but what we can do is advise you, give you updates as to where we're at.
Yeah, and I understand that. And look, but I mean, let's be honest and real with one another. We're not talking about some complicated set of fact pattern here. A phone was sanitized. We want to know what was on the phone and why it was sanitized. It's kind of an easy investigation. I'm not telling you how to do your job because I've never investigated anybody in my entire life, but
Yes, sir.
I do think it's not all that complicated for this purposes. I mean, it's what's on the phone and why'd you do it. I don't know why we can't set up a timeline for that to be complicated. On top of the fact it's pretty high profile, in my opinion.
Oftentimes that requires us to get information from whether it be the vendor, the phone company, and so forth. And again, we do not dictate or determine that
Let me
response.
ask, has Officer Kane been interviewed by the IA people as to why he sanitized his phone yet? Has he been interviewed? I should say it that way.
No, sir, not yet. And the reason being is we want to interview everybody else in that process first to make sure we get as much information possible so that when we do interview him, we do not miss out on the opportunity to question him on some things that...
I understand. Thank you.
Yes,
Representative Villio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colonel,
Morning,
I'm
ma'am.
rarely surprised. I make a habit of not being surprised, but I am surprised today. So let me start with, you admitted to the chair that you were, I guess, in error, misspoken about something 2 weeks ago before this committee. So let me ask you, were you or Lieutenant Colonel Kane in error when there was testimony before this committee that Lieutenant Colonel Kane oversaw IA? Was that a mistake to you?
Ma'am, again, I oversee internal affairs. I have overseen internal affairs since I've been here. I have the paperwork, the counseling, the planning forms to show that. So I can tell you that I oversee internal affairs.
And practically speaking, irrespective of whatever forms you have, practically speaking, since the day you took over as colonel, it's your testimony before this committee that all IA investigations, you oversee them?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I suppose you were in error when you spoke before this committee, testified before this committee 2 weeks ago. It was my understanding, unless I got it wrong, and I don't think I did, you testified that the IA investigation of Lieutenant Colonel Kane could be as much as 60 days and perhaps an extra 15. And now, if I understand you correctly, now you're saying 75 plus an extra 60?
If I said it was 60 plus 15, I was definitely wrong. But I do not recall saying that was 60 plus 15. The old Law Enforcement Bill of Rights stipulated that investigations were to be conducted for 60 days. Based upon our participation with the Police Screening and De-Escalation Committee, it was agreed upon that it would be moved from 60 days minus weekends and holidays to 75 days inclusive of weekends and holidays. And from there, if there was a request by us conducting the investigation, then I believe that we can request for an additional 60 days to conduct the investigation. It doesn't mean that it will be granted, but that we could request if we could justify a need to investigate. So again, if I spoke and said that it was 60 days plus 15, then I'll tell you up front that I was wrong about the number of days, but I do not remember.
Colonel,
So-
who's Buckland?
Buckland,
Yes, sir.
he's an internal affairs, Sergeant Buckland is an internal affairs investigator.
And isn't it true that Lieutenant Colonel Kane promoted Buckland to that position?
No, ma'am. I headed if I remember correctly, and I have to look, I think I missed one promotional board. I'm not sure if that's the one, so I need to verify and see if that's the one that I missed.
And Sergeant Buckland is the one who was sent to retrieve the phones the day before Lieutenant Colonel Kane's testimony before this committee. Isn't that correct?
That I don't know because, again, that was handled by my commander in internal affairs, so she would be able to speak to who she sent to collect the phones.
But you oversee the investigation, right?
She oversees the investigation. I manage the process and make sure that we are abiding by all of the rules and policies.
Colonel, who maintains or where or what agency maintains the GPS records for LSP vehicles?
LSP vehicles, I would have to get you that information.
If you could get that, and when I say LSP vehicles, particularly Superintendent Colonel's vehicles and any vehicles assigned at any time to the Colonel, I'd be interested in knowing who maintains those records.
Yes, ma'am.
And lastly, Colonel, who appointed Doug Kane as Lieutenant Colonel? Did you appoint him or did the governor appoint him?
I did, ma'am.
You did.
Yes, ma'am.
So when former Colonel Edmonston sent a text to the governor congratulating him on his selection of both you and Lieutenant Colonel Doug Kane, he was mistaken?
I don't know of such text and why he sent it, but I don't know why or who what he sent it to. So that's a text I'm not aware of.
Thank you, Colonel. Obviously, you weren't.
Thank you, Representative Villio. And one quick question. How long have you known Doug Kane?
For 24 plus years. We actually came through the State Police Academy together.
Thank you. Representative Backla's question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to kind of, part of the line of questioning I'd like to go down just to kind of set the stage is to talk about IA versus criminal investigation and so where they may overlap and where they may not. Okay, and I think it's as we talk about the actions the night that Ronald Greene was killed, the officers involved, that was subject to criminal investigation, correct?
As far as I know, yes, sir.
We got to get a little closer. I can't hear you. They got the paper going behind.
Yes, sir.
Was there also a corresponding internal investigation of the same event, or does state police stop the IA when the criminal investigation begins?
So I wasn't involved in the initial investigation dealing with Ronald Greene, so I couldn't tell you at that particular time whether or not there was an immediate internal affairs investigation. I do know, based upon accounts, that there was a criminal investigation that was initiated that very night. As far as the way that it's handled now, with regards to our investigations, when I came into this position, I took a look at our processes and procedures. As I understood them back then, basically a criminal investigation would ensue, and the administration at the time, as I understand it, and I want to be clear, this is just based upon my understanding, that they would basically hold off on an administrative investigation, no particular time span. What we have done is we've put in place a process to whereby now, if there is an investigation where we suspect that there may be criminal exposure, then we would initiate a internal affairs investigation. We stop the internal affairs investigation, we initiate the criminal investigation, conduct a criminal investigation. At the moment that we come to a point to send the criminal investigation to the district attorney for review, then at that particular point we reinitiate the internal affairs investigation. And there's a couple things, reason why we do not intermingle those investigations. One, because on the internal affairs investigation or the administrative investigations, you could be compelled, you are subject to being compelled to speak at the request of those investigators. Whereas in the criminal investigation, like any other criminal investigations, you have certain rights, whether it be the right to plead the fifth, attorney, and so forth. So that's our process as it stands today.
Okay, so I mean, it goes down to, I'm just going to summarize, it goes down to there's no right against protection against self-incrimination in an IA. You can be compelled,
Yes, sir.
but in the criminal, you can't force somebody. There can't be consequences, so that they kind of don't mix all the time. I know there's the guarantee rules and such as that, but it doesn't really mix. We don't go too far down that. How many people are in IA? I know that question was asked, but I don't know that I caught the answer. Or maybe it wasn't asking. It's just.
I will get you an exact number.
Well, give me about how many?
Oh, shucks. I'd say about 18.
And of the 18, are they centrally located or are they dispersed around the state?
Most of them are centrally located. We may have a polygraphist or two that's in other regions of the state, but most of them are centrally located.
All right, so since we're talking about Troop F, if there was an internal investigation of something at Troop F, you would deploy troopers from headquarters Baton Rouge to Troop F to conduct the investigation,
Yes,
or tell people to come from Troop F to Baton Rouge, one way or the other, correct?
Yes, sir.
Since you are in charge of IA, you would have access to all internal investigations that have taken place or taking place today, and those that would have taken place in the past. And obviously we're talking about, you would know if there was an internal investigation because there would be a record of that internal investigation for anything that might remotely be related to the matter which this committee is looking into.
Yes,
You'd
sir.
have access to it. You'd be able to say, you would be able to build your own file about everything that the state police did or was engaged with.
Yes, sir.
All right. While you've said that you are directly in charge and of internal affairs, the second question is, being there in their chain of command, is Doug Kane in the chain of command or outside the chain of command? That doesn't speak to who's in charge. You're in charge even if he's in the chain of command.
He's not in the chain of command. That
Okay.
chain of command come directly from that
All
commander
right, so
to me.
his duties do not include anything relative to IA.
Well, at times when we conduct investigations of troopers, and whether it be a lieutenant colonel over patrol, lieutenant colonel over investigations, if one of their troopers are involved in an investigation, then they are not in the chain of command, but they have situational awareness at times of what's going on. Now, if it's involving them at a certain point, then they do not have that situational awareness. That information is
Right.
provided and dictated by me as to
Right.
where that information goes.
He's not completely out the loop, is what I'm trying to say, on anything.
Well, if there's an investigation
Unless
involving
it's of him.
him,
Okay.
he is out the loop.
But
sir.
of all things otherwise, he may be the guy going down the hall on your behalf to check on. I'm not trying to portray it, but he's not completely disengaged from all things IA just because you're in charge of IA.
That's correct.
Okay. The other question I have is, we have to separate, I think, IA from criminal investigations. And certainly I know that criminal investigations have two flavors. They have your investigators looking at crimes committed by individuals who are not affiliated with LSP. Mm-hmm. And in this case, we know that there were criminal investigations going on of members of LSP, or an incident in which officers of LSP were involved. Let's just say that. Okay?
Yes, sir.
So my question is, certainly I don't know that I would invite you to give one answer or two answers regarding that. As far as IA reports to you, how does criminal investigations report to you? And would you typically, if you say yes, would you typically be updated on their investigation of a murder in Morehouse Parish? And yes or no? And if the investigation involves serious allegations of criminal wrongdoing against members of LSP, same question, how engaged would you be? I know it's a lot of questions, but it's all one question. I just want that much clarity.
Yes, sir. The Criminal Investigative Division has a chain of command that goes from sergeant to lieutenant to captain to major, and then their deputy superintendent, Lieutenant Colonel Van Buren. So they maintain that situational awareness on a daily. However, that information is reported to me, whether it be an outside person that's not an LSP or DPS employee, or if it's a DPS employee, that information is still communicated to me. A couple of ways. I am engaged. I maintain situational awareness on our investigations. I may not know all of the details and facts, but depending upon whether or not and what type of investigation it is, determines whether or not I am deeply engaged or not. So to answer your question, yes, I am engaged and I have situational awareness, whether it's external citizens or a DPS employee.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things that struck me in previous testimony, and just kind of generally speaking, it seemed, you know, we've heard the term "the buck stops here." Well, it seemed like there was never a situation where we had somebody says the buck stops here. It's like my hands off, so the buck stops somewhere else. It's beneath my level.
I'll tell you,
I do believe the buck should stop with the colonel for all things state police. And it has been disturbing that, you know, previous testimony that the colonel said I did not interfere, I did not get and did not get updates, and that, well, we can opine about that at a later moment. Okay, since you do have the authority, and I'm guessing you have the will. And I'm guessing you have the desire to know all things that happened regarding the aftermath of the Greene. The Greene incident. I would suspect that you have done an analysis. I think you're trying to fix things, and I would suspect that you've done an analysis and found out where y'all did a great job and where maybe you didn't do such a great job. And I'm talking about the post-incident investigation, okay? Because even though you weren't engaged or overseeing the internal investigation or the criminal investigation at the time that they were ongoing, certainly I think you have an interest. You can't fix it if you don't know what was broke back then. And I know you're trying to fix things, so I'm complimenting you on that. But let's just face it, you can't fix things that you don't understand, and I'm assuming that you did go back, you did look at it in globo, and you have formed some opinions, and you have begun or completed or done something to address the shortcomings. So I'm going to ask you the tough question: what are the shortcomings? What happened? What happened? Where did it fail? And if you say it didn't fail anywhere, I'll accept your answer and not like it. But I suspect that if we're open here, you'll say there's a whole bunch of places we didn't do a very good job, and that's what I'm looking for.
And there are a whole bunch of places we didn't do not even a good job. We've had some failures. We like to put it on policy or lack thereof, but there was some failure in oversight. There was some failure in accountability. There was some failure in communication, and there are some failures I still don't know about, and that's why I've asked for a third-party company to come in and really assess our agency from top to bottom. Sometimes that failure is putting the wrong people in the wrong place, putting people in leadership that should not be in leadership. And we have to face that, so we have to also fix it. But some of those failures were some of the supervisors not really taking a look at, whether it be the body-worn camera video when they should have, taking a look at the paperwork when they should have, or looking at it, period. And then those that did look at it, well, what did they surmise? What did they communicate? And then from there, what did they do to remedy that situation? So we had a bunch of failures, and those are the things that we're currently trying to fix, and we're going to fix them. But I think it's also important for us to not just look at it internally. And I started that. And I'll tell you, I really want to take an internal look at what some of those failures were, and that did not bode well. So that's why I asked for a third-party assessment team to come in. I think they will be more objective in looking at it. They'll be more critical as they look at it. And then from there, that'll give us the information we need to fix those areas.
Colonel, I suspect the third party is going to confirm what you already believe. I can't imagine that they're going to uncover anything that you haven't already uncovered. I would imagine that the third party is not going to be given nearly the access to everything that a colonel of state police has been given access to. So while I recognize the fact that you're probably looking to legitimize your conclusions, I'm pretty sure you've drawn a lot of conclusions here, and all you're trying to do is legitimize or maybe look at policy. But the bottom line is, I think policy is one thing, but people doing the right thing is it doesn't take policy for people to do what's right.
I agree.
And when people don't do what's right, whether they followed policy or not, it is a failure. Now, the other thing I'm going to say is, first of all, we keep referencing Lieutenant Colonel Kane. Right now, as far as I know, the only issue with him is he turned in a phone that got wiped. And it seemed like that might have been an ongoing issue, that everybody was turning in phones and getting wiped at some point in time. And that's certainly, I think, not good. All right, I'll just say it probably, with the retention of records and record schedules that exist with the state, it's probably going to be a violation of record retention, whether it was intentional or an oversight or a policy failure. But if that is the totality of the the thing that we're internally investigating, I can't imagine that it would take more than 3 hours. Go talk to everybody in the decision making process, and those who took the phone and those who wiped the phone, and within, if you come up with it in the morning, I can't imagine there would be anything more by 4 o'clock in the evening that you could do. So I will say that we may all this committee may come to the same outcomes that you come to in your internal review. The only thing is, I think we feel like it's more time sensitive, or there's an urgency to get to the bottom of it that I don't know that you guys have. So we may all be on the same track, but we're exceeding the speed limit, and y'all are putting down the road. Is kind of how I feel about it right now. So I think there is an urgency that we get to the end of this at some point in time. Mr. Chair, that'll conclude my questions. Thank you, Colonel.
Thank you. And I did want to clarify, or I want to ask you something. To date, I read a news article about an attorney, is it Murray, with the state police, who has been disciplined by IA related, I don't want to say related, but as part of the Ronald Greene circumstances. Is that correct?
Well, and again, when we respond to the media, oftentimes everything is not as accurate as we'd like it to be. As I mentioned before, I conducted an audit. I assembled an audit team, and she was a part of that audit team. That audit team's responsibility was not Ronald Greene. It was the agency. It was to look at, again, those gaps that we talked about. And based upon what we found, that there were some issues with regards to what occurred on her end. But yes, she was disciplined. We've since gone to civil service based upon some things. Again, we could have done better. That discipline was dismissed, but it was not with regards to Ronald Greene. It was with regards to her duties as a part of the audit team, which was
commissioned in the wake of Ronald Greene.
Well, there's a lot of things that have been commissioned since Ronald Greene, sir, but it may not have been something directly involving Ronald Greene.
Right. So as we sit here almost 3 years later, the only person to really receive any discipline as a part of a state police IA investigation is an attorney who was part of an audit team to address policies in the wake of Ronald Greene and other bad incidents in state police?
No, sir. I did initiate an investigation. Well, yes.
Nobody else is disciplined to date?
Yes, because the only other discipline that would have been doled out to the commander of Troop F retired prior to that discipline.
Okay. Representative Nelson has a question.
Okay. Morning, Colonel.
Good morning, sir.
Kind of in the same line of questioning that Representative Bacala was talking about, as far as the kind of the timeline for this IA investigation into Lieutenant Colonel Kane, I think at least from the testimony that we got from the IT specialist, whatever that was last time or last week, he made it seem like it was basically Lieutenant Colonel Kane, his secretary, and that IT specialist were the only people that were involved in that transaction. I mean, it seems kind of incredible that we haven't even there's only probably 3 people involved, and we haven't even got to interviewing Lieutenant Colonel Kane in this process. I mean, don't you think that timeline was probably something that we could, especially with this ongoing, we could make that go a little quicker so that, we could have some results on, this year probably?
Sir, I can tell you, again, we're going to follow our processes, and I think you all will want us to do that. When we bring in, whether it be a suspect or an employee, and we interview them prematurely, then oftentimes it gives them the information they need to go and either deal with or cover up. And I don't want to do that. I want to make sure that when our internal affairs investigators come in there, and they have all of the available information needed. And sometimes that information is coming from elsewhere, whether it be getting the company to tell us when was the phone cut off. Because if I got an employee that's saying, okay, I did it on this date, well, we need to confirm that before we go back before we go and talk to that employee. I don't want to come in and say, okay, well, for the sake of time, let me ask you all of these questions now. Now they can go back and formulate strategies for, well, why didn't they do this, this, and this? I want to have that information, and I think it's apparent, or it's important for our internal affairs to have the necessary information. So when they do interview him, then there is no coming back a second time and getting that second answer or third answer.
I understand.
But I can tell you, we're going to be finished with this investigation prior to the session being over with. Okay, this is something that's important to us, just like it's important to you all. And it may not seem like that, but it is. We just have certain processes that we've got to follow, and I'm asking for your understanding in that, because when we start to go away from those processes, when we start to go away from our training, when we conduct investigations, then that leads us down trails, and that leads us to positions to where we don't want to be. And that hurts our investigations, and that hurts the very outcome that we're trying to achieve.
No, well, I mean, I think just probably the committee would appreciate having that resolved as quickly as possible. The second question is, I know we've heard before that those results of those IA investigations are generally not public if it's not sustained. Is that correct?
That's correct, but I have offered to the chairman that we would make that information available to you under seal, and that way you all will have that information as you need.
Okay, good. That was my next question. So the other thing, I listened to the Hollingsworth IA recording, and I think at the end of that Hollingsworth IA recording that was done, I think shortly before, maybe the month before he died, he'd say, I think his attorney objected and said, hey, this wasn't done within the timelines that are required, that it wasn't, this action wasn't timely or something like that. Could you comment on kind of the required timelines? Maybe it's under the Bill of Rights or whatever it is that says they have to that the IA investigation and any discipline has to come within some period of time after the incident.
Well, again, it's been our policy that, as we discussed, at 15 days to notify them that there is an investigation that's being conducted. And that customarily for our department takes place when a captain or above receives that information, which means that that captain then makes a recommendation up the chain of command to say, we need to conduct an internal investigation. In that particular instance, obviously, it had happened in May of 2019, and that wasn't until months later before they decided to go and conduct an administrative investigation. Again, that does not exclude or prohibit or exempt us from doing our duty, which means that even if we did not do it in a time frame that we typically would, or that stipulated, doesn't mean that we can't come back and conduct that investigation. Now, the State Police Commission would have to rule to determine whether or not there is justification for us not doing so. But that's their jobs. Our job is, upon receiving that information in a timely manner or as the time stipulated, then conducting that investigation.
So there's no bar on any kind of discipline if you wait years to start an IA investigation, or you know what I mean. So as long as you can go to the state police commission and get that discipline instituted, then no matter how long you wait after the incident occurred.
Well, I'm not going to tell you can get it instituted. I can tell you that they would have to rule on it. And as far as a bar set, as far as discipline on those that wait, that decision is the superintendent's. That's my decision in my particular seat. At that particular time, that was Colonel Reeves' decision as to when he decided he wanted to conduct that investigation.
And for the lieutenant colonel, so should any discipline come from that, that's just going to come from you, correct?
That's correct. So if there is something that determines if he's sustained, then that discipline will come directly from me.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Representative Nelson. Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Colonel.
Good morning, sir.
Look, I certainly want to touch on some of the things some of the other members have spoken about, but let me ask you, how many direct reports do you have?
So I have internal affairs, I have public affairs, I have force investigative unit, I have operational development, I have chief of staff. Then from there, as the deputy secretary, I also have other budget unit heads, being Office of Legal Affairs, as well as management and finance, CAO, Lieutenant Colonel Jason Storns. I have Fire Marshal's Office. I have Liquefied Petroleum Gas Commission. I have Highway Safety, All Spill Coordinator's Office, and Office of Motor Vehicles. I think that completes them.
So you got about 15 people. I'm assuming the heads. You're talking about the heads of those agencies. So about 15 people that directly report to you, give or take.
Yes, sir. I'll get you an exact number.
I mean, I don't need it for the purposes of this, but I guess what I'm saying is this. You got 15 people that directly report to you out of, I don't know, you got over 1,000 employees. Would that be safe to say?
Under DPS, around 2,600.
Okay. So I wouldn't imagine that you would get into the weeds on a lot of this stuff. A lot of this stuff is you're more, I'm assuming, if from a management perspective, you're more high level. Would that be safe to say?
Yes, sir.
All right. So I guess seems to me it would be even more if let's talk about Doug Kane, for instance, and I want to talk about Jennifer Murray as well. The fact that Jennifer Murray, and I know you had her on an audit committee, but the fact that she got suspended for 120 hours, I would assume under a normal management situation, that wouldn't be something that you would directly initiate. Seems to me that somebody under you would initiate that and bring that up to you.
Well, because I assembled the audit committee, one, that was done by me, and solely by me. So any and everyone on that committee reported to that particular committee chairman, that captain, and then that captain came up to me.
Right.
Now, it also went through their budget unit heads or their office manager, which I can specify who that was. But for that reason, that's why I was involved, because I assembled that audit team.
Let me ask you this. Do you make a distinction between a leaker and a whistleblower?
And I will say this, sir, and I know where you're going to. If I would ask, because we're still going through appeals process, that I not get directly deep involved in
I
this,
understand that.
As I do that, then that's going to impact that particular case.
Let me say it like this, Colonel. And look, you've done it. I've said publicly before. I think you've done some great work. But I got to tell you, I'm reading a story about Jennifer Murray, and it disappoints me from this perspective. And I've talked about York and what I thought was a minimal and which I think you agreed was a basically a slap on the wrist as far as discipline is concerned. But this lady gets almost 3 times the amount on a suspension that he got. And Colonel, I got to tell you, I mean, we're talking about whether we're talking about Paxton, whether we're talking about Cavalier, now Jennifer Murray, others. It seems the only people that are getting disciplined are the people that are trying to bring this Ronald Greene thing. And I know Murray may be indirectly associated, but the people that are trying to bring this to light and the people who actually participated in the violence and as one of your guys said, the torture and murder of Ronald Greene are not getting disciplined at all. It just seems from an optics perspective, from a reasonable person, and I know in the law we talk about this imaginary reasonable person, but I just think from a reasonable person standard, this is difficult to deal with.
It is.
And I mean, look, I don't think, I know when you talked to Representative Marcel, you said that, well, we want you to follow the process. We want to recognize due process. And then when it doesn't turn out our way, that we have some issue. I'm going to tell you, wherever it goes from my perspective is where it goes. It's not necessarily what I want. I think it's what's a reasonable expectation from the public in general. Colonel, I think if you looked at anybody here, I would tell you I'd be confident in saying 95% of the people that you would poll would find that some of the actions of state police at this time are unreasonable. I think it's unreasonable for your number 2 guy to be under investigation and at least not be on administrative leave. To me, I think if you ask anybody, I understand what your standard is and what your criteria is, but I think if you ask anybody in the public, I would tell you, I think it would be an overwhelming majority of people that would say that that's unreasonable, that shouldn't happen. And I understand that optics doesn't tell the whole story. I understand that there's a difference between what people believe is the truth and what the truth is. And I'm not sitting here and saying to you that Kane, as far as the sanitizing of the phone, that there was anything necessarily wrong with that. I don't know, but I can't say that it wasn't. And in fact, you in a public interview have said yourself that you can't say that it wasn't. And by that very mere fact that we can't say that, then until we can say that there was nothing wrong, or at least we can't prove that there was anything wrong, then he should probably be on leave. Colonel, I just look, I can't tell you what the morale of your overall office is, but I can tell you if I were working for you right now, and I'm seeing stuff like Jennifer Murray, and I'm seeing things like Carl Cavalier, and I'm seeing good people, which I consider to be good people, like Albert Paxton resigning, and his words, people going after his wife and things like that, I would not feel good about that. I just wouldn't, and I don't feel good about it sitting in this seat. But if I were working under that, I just think that some of the unspoken messages that are being sent by those actions certainly wouldn't leave a person like me in a good position, because I certainly try to speak out and go for the truth, and I just fear I just think that there is a chilling effect that is placed on people who really want to speak out and do the right thing by those actions, because it's like it's like they say, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. So nobody wants to speak out, because if you look at these actions, those are the only people that are getting hammered down.
Sir, and I'll say this. It's tough. It's tough. There's no way around it. Whether it be me walking into this position with all of the accusations of my department and my personnel, or whether it be those media reports that are coming through. I said day one that I would not come out against any employee, regardless, right, wrong, or indifferent. And I stand by that. And I will walk out of here before I do that, because that's my integrity. So I'm not going to compromise that. If an employee decides to go to the media, then that's their right. Go to the media within certain respects. Okay, but we have policies, we have rules. And one of the tough things that you have to really think about when you walk into a situation like this is there's a lot of bad things that may have happened prior to me walking in. And some of those feelings are still there. Some of those employees or former employees may still feel that same way. They feel that things did not happen the way that they should have happened. But I have a job to do, and that's to maintain the integrity of this department, to maintain the laws, to maintain the Constitution. And I'm going to do that. I'm not going to compromise it because of the media. I'm not going to compromise it because someone feels a certain way. I'm going to do my job. And that's what I have done. And if you would just hear me out. Every day that I come here, I stopped reading the newspaper. I used to pick up the newspaper every morning, and I'd look at it to see what was going on. And the reason why I would do that is because I missed it one day, not doing it when I was in intelligence. And that's when 911 happened. I said I'd never do that again. But I'm now doing it because I don't want to see what's published in the paper, because it's not the facts. And that's what a lot of people are responding to. I can't tell you now, I've opened myself to the media. I've conducted interviews with the media. I've gone back and I've asked them for retractions, but you all don't get those retractions. So when an employee or a former employee or anyone says something in the media and you read it and then you come in and you question me about it, then that puts me at a disadvantage. And I'm okay with that because I raised my hand for this position. But when I tell you that I'm doing my very best and I'm doing it and I'm upholding the integrity that I told you I would do, that's exactly what I'm doing. And I'm just not going to compromise that. If you all feel that at that particular point that's not enough for you, then I understand that.
Well, and I'm going to interject for a second, because the purpose of this committee is to provide oversight to the executive branch. So the whole I think purpose of what our questions are designed to do is to find out what the truth is and part of our oversight responsibilities, because we accept that things are reported incorrectly, and that's why we're here. I mean, but at the same time, we also feel like there's a certain amount of stonewalling that's happening from state police, and I'm just being honest with you, it feels like you're using the IA investigation as a shield instead of. And you may be correct. I'm not accusing you of that. It just, given the history of this, from where we were in May 10th, 2019 to where we are today, it seems like it's just more of the same of not actually ever getting to a conclusion, not getting to resolution, and nobody ever being held accountable other than protecting the system itself. But I'm gonna turn it back over to Representative Jordan.
No problem. So, and look, Colonel, I hear what you're saying. But I guess you got to understand from my perspective, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whenever it was, state police was on this pedestal. I don't think anybody necessarily questioned the integrity when we probably should have been, frankly. And then now we're looking, we know that the integrity has been compromised. We know that. I don't think any of us can debate that the integrity on some level of state police has been compromised. And so it to me, it seems that if transparency is the key, we should be having more transparency, not less transparency. And I understand that you're trying to be as transparent as you feel comfortable in doing. But frankly, that may not be enough, because if we were on a level playing field, if we said, okay, there was nothing to compromise the integrity of state police, maybe this is enough transparency. But we're not at that point. We know integrity has been compromised, and when we see some of the actions that are going on, and some of the people who may have played a part in compromising the integrity of state police, still being on staff, still being paid, not being punished, that's an issue. Now, I understand your process, and again, I would never ask anybody to violate someone else's due process. I wouldn't do that. But there are ways within still honoring and protecting their due process rights that can give some comfort to the public and some integrity. And I don't. Well, let me just say this. I'm not going to even equivocate about it. I don't think you're going for enough in that.
Well taken, and to Representative Marcel's point, I will be rethinking some things. Okay, and there's no blueprint to this position, to the decisions. I can tell you the one bad thing that you can do is do nothing. But if you're doing something to try to fix the issue, I would also ask for your understanding in that.
I think, look, we've had conversations. I always have thought we've had good conversations. I think I'm fair. And if I'm unfair, look, I don't mind you saying it. You think I'm unfair in my assessment. But at this point, I'm just telling you, I don't think enough has been done, certainly to give me comfort. And I think if you would, and look, this is not a poll. You don't have to go with which way the wind is blowing. I don't want you to do that. I want you to stand strong for what you believe in, and that's fine. But we just disagree on some of the actions that have or have not been taken from our last meeting to today.
Yes, sir.
All right, Representative Marcel has requested the 5-minute rule, so I'm going to grant that, and we're going to proceed with the 5-minute rule to try and we've got more witnesses today.
Yes, sir.
You're welcome. Representative Villio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colonel, you're familiar with the Louisiana State Police Commission rules, are you not?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
And you would agree that pursuant to Chapter 4, Section 4.1, Subpart A, all persons subject to state police service are governed by those rules, correct?
I think that's what it says.
Then, Colonel, surely you know that under those rules, the officer's Bill of Rights would not apply to the purported investigation of Lieutenant Colonel Kane. Are you aware of that?
Yes, but we do operate off of the foundation of the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights.
And you're familiar with that. The rules say that the officer's Bill of Rights is considered an unconstitutional infringement on the constitutional authority of the commission, which the state police are governed by, correct?
Okay.
You're aware of that?
I am.
Thank you. Nothing further, Mr. Chair.
All right, Representative Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, let me apologize for my tardiness, and I'm going to apologize in advance that I might be running in and out because Judiciary is struggling to keep a quorum, so I might have to leave to vote. But, Colonel, I've spent the last weekend just going back and looking at testimony from our previous hearings, and I've been poring over these documents, have read every page, and there's still some things that's just not adding up to me. And so I apologize if I missed something, so I'm going to ask this to you and to staff. Trooper York's audit trail, have we received that yet? Has that ever been requested? If not, I'd like to request that. So I'd like to request that. Also, I'd like to see the crash report from the night of the incident. So can I request that as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then, Mr. Chairman, I've consistently heard Lieutenant Colonel Chavez and Lieutenant Colonel Van Buren's name come up. And I think they could help me in particular connect some missing dots because some things are not adding up. So I would ask at a future hearing that Lieutenant Colonel Chavez and Lieutenant Colonel Van Buren be asked to appear before the committee. And that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, next we have Representative Bacala.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colonel, we keep talking about the Kane investigation and the long delays. I would add that I think Lieutenant Colonel Kane has some right or expectation of a quick determination I mean, if he has done nothing wrong, I don't know why we keep dragging his name through the paper forever. I think you do a disservice to Lieutenant Colonel Kane or to any officer by continually dragging out investigations and keeping those individuals under that shadow of this is a person under internal affairs investigation. And listen, having participated in a whole bunch of those through a career, I think probably 75% are unfounded or not, or absolutely proven to be not true, whatever the allegations are. And I think leaving that shadow sitting over Lieutenant Colonel Kane is a disservice to him. I think when you do that with any other officer who's publicly acknowledged as being under internal investigation and they stay that way for years, it's just unfair. And that's how I feel about that. I think it serves the public and it serves the officer to have a quick determination. And that doesn't mean that you speed it up so fast that you don't make the right decision, but you don't drag them out forever. I have, and I don't think you can answer this today, but I'm gonna put this line of questioning on the record relative to the Ronald Greene incident. How many separate internal investigations have begun? How many people have come under internal investigations relative to the Ronald Greene incident? How many of those investigations have been complete, and how many of them have resulted in sustained determination of improper conduct? Now that's a big question. I don't know if you have that information at hand, but I'd like to know how many people have been investigated, how many different aspects have been investigated, and are they ongoing? Are they been concluded? Give me status. That's a question I think I would like to know for future reference. And with that, I'll turn the mic over to Representative Villio.
Thank you, Representative Bacala. We have Representative Marcel lit up, but I don't know if that's an error. Otherwise, the board is clear.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Colonel.
Yes, sir.
I believe DA Belton, District Attorney Belton is next. Is District Attorney Belton here? Good morning.
How you doing, sir? Good to see you again.
Mr. Belton, can you prepare a white card?
Sure.
Thank you. He wants me to specify.
Yeah.
I didn't want to.
No, you're good. Everybody's. I think everybody had to do a mass break at one time. Sure.
Thank you.
1 second, District Attorney Belton. We've lost our quorum. I think everybody
Yes,
needed a
Ron.
break.
No
We had
rush.
it. Let's go. Thanks, Amy. All right. Is that back? All right. Thank you, District Attorney Belton, for being here today and willingly come to testify about the incident involving Ronald Greene. If you'd like to make any comments, however you want to handle it's fine with me as chairman.
Yes, and I would like to make a statement as well.
Sure, please.
First and foremost, I'd like to give all the praise, honor, and glory to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Secondly, I would like to thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of this committee, for seeking the truth for Mr. Ronald Greene and his family. Transparency is the key, and I think that's the only way we can seek justice and obtain justice for the Greene family. And I appreciate your service, not only for allowing me to speak here today, but also the citizens of the state of Louisiana. I thank them for allowing me to be here as well.
Thank you.
Go ahead,
I'm sorry.
Sure. And my name, for the record, is John Belton. I'm the district attorney for Lincoln and Union parishes in North Louisiana. On May 10th, 2019, Mr. Ronald Greene tragically died while in the custody of Louisiana State Police. My heart breaks for Mr. Ronald Greene and his family. His mother, Miss Mona Hardin, is very strong and resolute in seeking justice for her son. What I respect about her the most is her unselfish commitment to justice for all. When I spoke to her last week, she said, and I quote, "I'm not seeking justice just for Ronnie, but for the other families who are experiencing the same injustices." I've been quoted as saying that the video I saw of Mr. Ronald Greene while in the custody of state police is the worst thing I've ever seen. That quote accurately reflects my reaction, and I stand by that statement today. On September 9th, 2019, after my initial viewing of the video, I believed state and federal crimes were committed, including federal civil rights violations. On that same day, I immediately took action by requesting the United States Department of Justice to conduct an independent investigation of the circumstances surrounding Mr. Greene's death, including whether any federal and or civil rights violations occurred, which can only be prosecuted by the United States Attorney's Office. In doing so, I did not, and I repeat, I did not recuse my office. In fact, I have maintained prosecutorial power to prosecute state crimes which occurred in my district, specifically the parish of Union. In order to prevent impeding the federal investigation, I was asked by the United States Attorney's Office not to institute formal proceedings in state court until they initiated prosecution on the federal level. I agreed for the following primary reasons. First, what I perceive as the necessity to have a complete and independent investigation, since both the Louisiana State Police and the Union Parish Sheriff's Office had officers on the scene. Secondly, the vast resources that the United States Department of Justice could bring to the table to benefit the investigation and bring justice for the Greene family. Finally, notwithstanding the possibility of pursuing homicide charges, I felt that the federal rights violations would expand the potential for penalties upon conviction as compared to some of the potential state charges. All of the interested parties deserve nothing less than a fully resourced, independent investigation with the ultimate goal of justice, including justice for Ms. Mona Hardin and the family of Mr. Ronald Greene. Since I involved the United States Department of Justice, additional evidence has been gathered. For example, the forensic pathologist had issued a supplemental report which eliminates, and I repeat, eliminates, the motor vehicle collision as a cause of death, when initially the autopsy report said it did. Additionally, I have now been provided with the Clary video, like all of us, by state police investigators, which was not in the original case file submitted to me on August 20th, 2019. Regarding state crimes, I plan to take further action as soon as all available evidence is in my possession, including testimony that was gathered here and in the past by this committee. Last week, I contacted Ms. Mona Harding, to let her know that the United States Attorney Brandon Brown recently advised me that the United States Department of Justice is no longer requesting that I withhold prosecuting state charges while their investigation is ongoing. He has committed to sharing their resources, which include their investigative reports to date and access to FBI investigators to aid my office in prosecuting any and all state charges. Accordingly, after receiving the United States Department of Justice investigative report, I will request that a special grand jury be impaneled in Union Parish. My plans is to present all relevant evidence to the grand jury for their determination of appropriate charges. I have confidence in the United States Attorney Brandon Brown, his office, the Department of Justice, and like all of you, I eagerly await the results of their 2.5-year investigation. I believe it is of the utmost importance that Mr. Ronald Greene family and the public as a whole be provided complete and truthful answers about what happened to him. I will never, and I repeat, I will never make prosecutorial decisions due to political pressure or public opinion. I, like all prosecutors, must adhere to seeking justice based on the law and evidence. I will follow this standard as I always have in the 30 years I've been a prosecutor. No one is above the law. No one. Based on the evidence I have seen and the investigation thus far, I believe some of the officers' actions were above the law, and they committed criminal acts, including violating Mr. Greene's civil rights. Under our Constitution, everyone has a constitutional right, everyone has a constitutional right to a due process and fair and impartial hearing in court. Mr. Greene was not afforded that right. Since the federal investigation is ongoing, I am very limited to what I can say, especially Code of Professional Conduct, Code of Professional Responsibility prevents me from saying certain things about the merits of the case. As I have previously stated publicly, ethically, I cannot promise an indictment, nor can I promise a conviction. I did, however, promise to Mr. Greene's family on numerous occasions that I will continue to seek justice for them as I do for all victims and the people of Louisiana. I have never wavered from that commitment, and I will never waver in that commitment today or ever. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No, thank you. I really appreciate your comments. Let me ask you a question. It's one I've gotten a lot from a lot of people is who in the U.S. Attorney's Office told you to not institute charges while the investigation was pending?
Acting U.S. Attorney at that time was Alec Van Hook,
Okay.
as well as the lead prosecutor on the case, Mr. Luke Walker.
Okay. Was it Mr. Walker who told you, or was it Mr. Van Hook?
Both.
Both. Okay. And my second question is, and I always am hesitant to do this kind of stuff, but it was my impression when Colonel Reeves testified that he was under the impression that you were not pursuing charges. That was his conclusion when he testified to us. Was that, if that was my impression, is that an accurate statement? I guess is what I'm trying to say. Where did he get that from? Would be a better way to put it.
I don't recall where he received that from, but he did not receive that from me. My position has always been to seek justice for the Greene family, and that is unwavering for me.
Okay. I'm going to turn it over to the committee for, and look, one thing I want to do is I want to tell you I appreciate the timeline you gave us with the PowerPoint slide. I asked some questions about it, but I'm going to let some other people talk first, and I'm going to ask you about it after. Representative Marceau.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today. And I, too, want to thank you for the timeline. It really helped us to figure out kind of what you knew, when you knew, the video that you were not presented with initially. And I know you're limited to what you can tell us today.
Yes.
But you talked about state and federal crimes that you saw being committed based upon the evidence that you have looked at. And you also spoke about Union Parish Sheriff being on the scene. Is there any possibility, or are they being investigated as well from by the U.S. Department of Justice?
Yes.
And is there any possibility, because we have not heard a lot about them, we've heard a lot about state police, but we've not heard much about the Union Parish Sheriff's Office. And so there is a possibility that they too may be charged with some state or federal crimes?
The way that I must answer that question is that there are under investigation.
There are an investigation.
Yes.
And you do believe that what you saw how long have you been in?
30 years.
30 years?
I'm in my 31st year.
31st year. Okay. Civil rights violations, you do believe that you saw being violated in that evidence that you've reviewed?
Thus far, yes.
Thus far.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I don't want to make you open yourself up to anything else, but I do want to thank you for the timeline and clarity on when you first got this case, no one gave you that clarity video. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
And so that was withheld from you.
I did not receive it until I did not know anything about it. I received a file on August 20th, 2019, and I think that video surfaced sometime in 2020.
Right. Would that be normal, in your opinion, for a file to come to you for investigating purposes and a video of that magnitude to be left out? Do you think that that's normal?
Based upon my experience, that is not normal.
That's not normal. Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome.
Thank you, Representative Marcel. Representative Nelson.
Hey, DA Belton. How you doing today?
Fine, thank you. How are you, sir?
Living the dream. The best thing is having two committee meetings at the same time.
Yes.
But
thank
yeah,
you
no
for your
worries.
service, sir. Appreciate you.
Yeah, no problem. So the first thing I'd ask is it common for the state to pause an investigation or prosecution during a federal investigation? I feel like all the, Armand Arbery, and you might have seen that we had a sheriff in St. Tammany Parish that had concurrent state and federal investigations. They get charges on both, and it's kind of gone at the same time. I've never seen DOJ say, don't press any charges on a state level on separate charges, even while they're pursuing these civil rights actions. Is that a normal thing? Has that ever happened to you before?
It's not uncommon. It's never happened to me before, but it's not uncommon for the federal government to ask a local district attorney not to proceed. Can they stop me? No. But I felt like it was in the best interest to seek justice. One reason is because you had state police that investigated state police. And so it was important for me to make sure the evidence that I received came from an independent agency. I'll give you some examples. So typically, city police department is normally investigated by either the sheriff or the state police. The parish sheriff's office is typically investigated by the state police if they ask them to come in. But there's no one to investigate state police. And so in this scenario, you had a state police officer who was a suspect, or a number of them. And so it was important for an independent investigation to be initiated, so therefore I can get an independent review and independent facts moving forward, especially in light of some of the problems, and I won't go into the specifics, but some of the problems that Trooper Al Paxton and Trooper Scott Brown ran into in terms of what they wanted to present to me. I'll leave it at that. So
when they turned over the file, when they turned over the information to you, I guess, do they recommend that charges be brought, or is that how that works? So
they recommended to state police, as I understand it, to bring charges to the colonel, right? Mm-hmm. But they did not. We talked about charges, right? But at that point in time, we did not present to the grand jury or did not file a bill of information because I immediately involve the United States Department of Justice.
I think, similar to the questions we asked Colonel Davis, the timeline here just has become kind of ridiculous. At the end of the day, we're 3 years now, and presumably at least some of the troopers or whoever could be charges be brought against, they've just been essentially operating and working in state police this entire time. And state police has been here testifying to us this whole time that they didn't want to get involved or they didn't want to do anything because there was an ongoing criminal investigation. So they're kind of passing the buck to you. I mean, for whether it's your fault or not, I mean, they're passing the buck to you, saying, "Hey, look, there's an ongoing criminal investigation. We turned everything over on, what is this? According to your timeline, September 9th, 2019." And so since September 9th, 2019, they've been saying the ball's in the district attorney's court. If he doesn't want to do anything, what are we supposed to do at state police? We turned over the evidence. And I understand they didn't turn over the Clary video. Obviously, that came up after. But even the video and the evidence that they did turn over was at least enough for the initial investigators to say, hey, this is wrong. And it was at least enough for you to say, as soon as you saw it, hey, this is wrong. We're going to turn over the federal investigators. So did any time in that, I guess the intervening 2 or 3 years, has that ever, did it ever come to you that maybe this is something that we should pursue just because this seems like the feds are taking too long? Like, how did that, can you tell me what your thought process is in just holding off that long? I mean, if it was like a 60 days, 60 days, I don't think anybody would be criticizing because we say we'll rather let it run.
So
But
thank you for
3
your
years.
question, Representative Nelson. I really appreciate that. Number one, let me say that I did take action. I took action immediately and involved the federal authorities because of their resources, because I thought it was in the best interest of the Greene family to bring them in to obtain justice for them. With respect to the timeline, I must agree with you that it has taken a long time. And my conversation with then U.S. Acting Attorney last summer, Alec Van Hook, I said, I'm ready to pursue these charges. It's been a long time. I've been waiting. I've been patient because I gave them my word. And I'm a man of my word. I gave them my word that I would wait until their investigation was complete so I can gather more information and not impede their investigation. And I gave my word to the Greene family to make sure that I would bring justice. And so I had to balance those two promises. And when I spoke to Acting U.S. Attorney Alan Van Hook last summer, he said, John, we're going to have indictments probably in September or October. Could you just please wait? You've waited this long. I said, sure. And then it became the goalposts moved. And let me add this. I am not throwing the U.S. Attorney's Office under the bus. They work well with my office. The acting U.S. Attorney at that time, Alan Van Hook, worked well with me. The new U.S. Attorney, Brandon Brown, is a fabulous person as well. And they work well with me, keep me informed of everything and what's going on for the most part. There's some things they can't share with me, but we have a very, very good working relationship. And so in November, I was told that there was a possibility that they would have an indictment in December. At that time, I called Ms. Mona Hardin and said, we're going to possibly get indictment in December. And I remember her response was something about the holidays and Christmas and stuff like that would be really nice. But it didn't happen. And so I got a call from U.S. Attorney Brandon Brown last week, and he shared with me that they've decided to allow me to move forward with the state charges. And I thanked him, and I immediately called Ms. Mona Harding on last Friday to let her know of that news.
And so my last question, I think they're going to cut me off. Do you have any kind of memo or email where that documents DOJ saying, we request you do not press charges or do not pursue anything? Do you have those actual documents?
No, I do not. But I have
they
if
exist?
you want to look at my cell phone, because I know my text messages with Mr. Brown, I can share with. I didn't sanitize my phone.
Do us a favor and don't smash it in your tailgate.
But I'll be glad to show you. I'll be glad to show you my text messages to Mr. Brown recently of this week. He indicated to me that he would get a letter to me on Friday. He wrote the letter Friday. But that letter needed to be approved by Washington, D.C. before it was sent to me. I have that if you'd like to look at it.
Okay, yeah, I think that might be helpful.
Okay,
Thank
sure.
you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Representative Nelson. Let me kind of go over some things with you. I want to. So, May 10th, 2019, we have the incident. Then I think you meet with September 9th, 19. I think you also then meet with Scott, Albert, Cliff Strider, Lori James, and Russ. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And that's when you see the video for the first time, and they y'all review the case. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
You don't have to call me Your Honor. I mean, I'd love to. Unfortunately, I don't have that.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And then I think it is my understanding from the testimony we received that Strider, I don't know where he comes from, whose office he's in, he recommends the U.S. Attorney's Office because of potential civil rights violations.
He was in my office at that time.
And then you agreed with the recommendation at that time. Is kind of what I understood the meeting I wasn't there, obviously, but that's what I kind of understand. Is that correct?
I left the meeting room. My office is next to the conference room. I exited the conference room, walked into my office, picked up the phone, and called the U.S. Attorney's office immediately.
So that's when you called. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then I think you meet with, on about a month later, October 13th, 2019, you meet with people in the governor's office and representatives of Louisiana State Police about the release video. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I think that's on your timeline.
It is.
Who was in that meeting? Do you remember?
That was regarding the release of the video, if I'm not mistaken.
That's what your PowerPoint says.
Colonel Reeves, Matthew Block, myself, my first assistant, Lori James, and another attorney from the governor's office.
Okay.
I don't recall her name.
Was it Tina, possibly?
I think so. Yes, sir.
Okay. And then, and a lot of this information I'm also getting from testimony we have. I think Trooper Paxton says that he sees you on 10/23/2019. He's working detail at a Louisiana Tech event during the campaign. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And then he says that that's when he first hears the phrase that Reeves told you it was awful but lawful. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And is that what Reeves told you?
Yes.
So according to Colonel Reeves, and did Colonel Reeves tell you that in the 2019 meeting when y'all talked about the release of the video? When did he tell you that? I guess is what I'm trying to find.
At that event at Louisiana Tech University.
Did you have any conversations with the governor at that event about the same thing you talked to?
I did not.
Okay. Then on September 16, 2020, Matthew Blocks texted you and asked you if you had a moment to talk. Do you recall that?
What date was that?
That was September 16, 2020. I know this is hard. This is a 3-year investigation. I'm not trying to trick you.
I do recall that, yes.
And then that was that moment to talk in reference to the Ronald Greene matter?
I would assume, yes, because that's the only issue that we have that it's common.
And then October 5th, Block texts you again requesting to talk later that afternoon. That would also be about the Ronald Greene matter. Is that correct?
I would only assume so, yes.
And then October 7th, Blocks texts you again and says, if and when the governor decides to release the video, and then I'm not sure if maybe you texted Matthew that, and then I said, I greatly appreciate you, and the governor. That would be also about Ronald Greene, correct?
Yes.
So you were leaving it up to John Bell, or the governor, I'm sorry, to discuss the releasing of the video. Is that correct? That's what I'm gathering from these text messages.
And what's that date again? I'm sorry.
That is October 7th, 2020.
And that's when they visited my office? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know if they visited your office. I think they visited your office on the 20th. It looks like the 13th.
Uh-huh.
And then of 19, and this is a year later, and you and Matthew Block are exchanging text messages about the video.
Okay.
And then, according to the text message, I believe on October 11th, Matthew Blocks texts you offering to arrange for Colonel Reeves to pick you up in the air in the state trooper's helicopter. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. The only times I talked to the governor's office regarding the Ronald Greene matter would be, one was a policy issue, the second one was the release of the video, and I think it was meeting with the family. Yes, if I'm not mistaken.
And you were aware when the state police came to pick you up that they had potential criminal charges. I think that's one of the reasons why you said that you turned it over to the U.S. Attorney's Office, because you knew they were involved.
Yes.
And then on October 12th, you texted, I think, the contact info for Alex Van Horn, who was the U.S. Attorney, to Matthew Block. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But I mean, I'm assuming that's so Matthew Block could talk to the U.S. Attorney about the case.
So, for clarity,
yeah, sure.
So I received a call from the governor's office, and if I recall, it was the governor himself asking me if I was okay with the release of the video, and I said sure. I don't have a problem with releasing the video. However, since the federal government is involved, we need to make sure they're okay with it. He asked me to contact the federal authorities. I did. And they indicated that they were not comfortable in releasing the video, but that we can show it to the family. And I think you have a letter confirming that.
Sure. And then on October 14th, you texted Matthew Blocks, offering to answer your questions from the Black Caucus. Do you recall that?
If I texted him, I'm sure I did. Yes.
So it seems to me during October of 2020, you're in somewhat frequent contact with the governor's office. Is that fair to say?
Not frequent. If I guess that I was in contact with him about the release of the video and meeting with the family and a policy issue. But before then and since then, I've not been in contact with them on a regular basis.
And then on April 24th, 2021, there's another meeting. I think this is when you see the Belton. I think this is when you see the Clary video for the first time. Is that correct?
Yes.
And in that meeting is you, Lori, and Louis Jones. Is that right? Louis Jones. I'm sorry.
Louis Jones. That's
I
correct.
apologize if I mess up anybody's name.
He's my chief felony prosecutor.
Okay. Y'all discussed possible charges at that time.
Yes.
Who else was in that? Was that anybody else in that meeting?
Well, let me back up. Is that with the governor's staff, or I don't have my notes with me? I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm trying to get, and I know I'm not trying to trick you or anything. I'm just trying to get the timeline.
Right.
I can look on here too. So on yours it says, on your PowerPoint it says receive supplement from LSP with Clary video. So I think this is when you see the Clary. Who else was in that meeting? Do you know?
That was when Colonel Davis. I requested a meeting with Colonel Davis because of that release of the video that I was not aware of, did not possess at the time. And I wanted to talk to him about it, and also because he was just appointed not long before that date, and I wanted to talk to him about the case as well.
Okay. And on May 20th, 2021, you meet with Colonel Davis again, and this time I believe, in your PowerPoint says that Doug Kane and Chavez Kamen are also there to discuss the Clary video. Do you recall that meeting?
Yes.
Now, a lot of the information I'm getting from all this is from Albert Paxton's notes. One of the weird things, well, not weird, but in a bad way, unusual, is he keeps very detailed notes, more than I think most people do. Mm-hmm. He is told that from somebody, I think, regarding this meeting, that Kane tells you that his supplemental report contains lies in it. Do you know it? Do you recall Doug Kane telling you that? That
Kane tells me that his supplemental report contains lies in it?
Yes.
I don't recall.
Do you remember what Doug Kane told you in that meeting?
If it was about the Clary's video, there was a discussion as to whether or not certain crimes had been committed. And it was a conversation whereby my office and Louisiana State Police went back and forth with respect to our opinion of the facts in the video and whether or not crimes had been committed.
Did Reeves or Kane ever tell you that the Paxton report was not accurate?
I don't recall. He may have told my first assistant, Lori James, but I don't recall. He may have.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And you say he, or saying Kane or Reeves?
I thought you were talking about Mr. Paxton.
About the Paxton report. I think Lori James told, my understanding is Lori James told Paxton that Kane and Reeves said that his report wasn't accurate. That's how I
I'm sorry. Yeah, now I understand your I don't that could have happened, but I don't recall. And let me say this. I'm very leery, and I have to be very, very cautious about any conversations I had, because I do know that Louisiana State Police is under federal investigation. So I've met with the federal investigators as well as the prosecutors about all the meetings I've had. So I need to be very careful about what was said and what wasn't said.
And I totally understand. But,
yes.
I mean, I'm not aware that Doug Kane or Colonel Davis or Colonel Reeves are under investigation. In fact, Colonel Reeves...
No. Colonel Davis is not under investigation. Colonel Reeves is not under investigation.
Right. So my question is, did Colonel Reeves tell you that or tell anybody in your office, to your understanding, that the Paxton report was not accurate?
I don't recall that.
There seems to be a lot of hesitation in that answer.
They said a lot. I mean, that's probably a paraphrase. And for me to be able to verify that, I would have to say a lot and explaining everything in detail and then make a conclusion or summary. So I'm very careful about what I'm saying tonight, because I don't want to jeopardize the investigation nor taint a potential
I understand.
grand jury or petit jury because I want justice for the Greene family.
If Lori James had reported, you wouldn't. Lori James has not ever been known to say things that are untrue to your knowledge.
She's a very honest person.
So if she said that to
One of the
somebody,
most honest
probably-
people I know.
Okay. Then on May 20th, 2021, you texted Matthew Block a copy of your press release or statement, however you want to call it, about Ronald Greene. Is that correct?
Yes. And I also texted U.S. Attorney's Office as well.
Okay. And then May 25th, 2021, you texted Matthew Block again wanting to meet, the Greene family wanting to meet. You're letting him know that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you included the phrase, please let the governor know.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
So you were communicating primarily with Matthew Block and assuming he was communicating with the governor about the case.
That is correct.
Then I think, and then this gets confusing to me, I'm trying to find some clarity in it. On July 12th through 13th, I think you requested a meeting with Paxton maybe, or Colonel Davis. I can't quite figure out from Paxton's notes. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And
I think I requested a meeting with Paxton and Brown, Trooper Paxton and Brown.
okay,
Yes.
did y'all end up meeting?
Yes.
Okay, I think y'all might have met July 15th, but I'm not entirely sure. That's correct?
Yes.
And then, and let me ask you this. In his notes, Trooper Paxton does an interview with Dupuy and Boudreaux regarding Officer Turner, and he tells the interviewers that Lamar Davis and Doug Kane told Belton that Paxton should not be trusted. Is that accurate?
I don't recall Colonel Davis ever telling me that.
What about Doug Kane?
I don't recall him telling me that. Again, it may have been said, but I don't recall them saying that.
And then you met with Van Buren, Davis, and then I think it just says LSP investigators on November 22nd, 2021. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you remember what what was the purpose or what was discussed in that meeting?
I can tell you that every meeting I had with the Louisiana State Police dealt with the Ronald Greene matter, or the release of the Ronald Greene video, or the Clara video, the surfaced Clara video that I received later. So if we did meet, it was about the Ronald Greene matter. Yes.
Let me ask you this: have you been watching these hearings that we've been
I've
doing?
watched some, not all of them.
I can understand. Did you learn anything new during these that you did not know before?
I will be send a subpoena to you to receive certain transcripts. Yes.
Okay.
Very interesting information that I think can be helpful to the case.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Representative Jordan has a question.
Good morning. I guess it's, yeah. I'm on, yeah. Good morning, Diego.
morning.
How you doing today?
I'm doing great, thank you. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Look, I'm going to try to be brief with this, but you heard my questioning of the colonel earlier, right?
Yes.
All right. Let me ask you something. I'm just an country lawyer. I'm not a 31-year prosecutor, but I'm going to make it as simple as I can. Let's say you and we decided to become criminals today, and we said we're going to rob a bank, right? But I decide before we go do it, hey, look, we're not going to cause anybody harm. We're not going to do anything like that. We're just going to get the money and we're gone. And in the process of doing that, and I'm going to make you the trigger man, you decide you shoot and kill somebody and we're gone. Now, can we both be prosecuted for the same crime? Can we both be prosecuted for murder?
Yes.
All right. If me and you, we decide we're going to fight somebody and we jump, I'm not going to use man. We'll jump Bacala. I'm going to use him. And we start fighting on Bacala, and you pull out your gun and you shoot Bacala. Can we both be charged for the same crime?
Yes.
All right. Now, I'm looking at second-degree murder here. Second-degree murder is the killing of a human being when the offender has a specific intent to kill or inflict great bodily harm. In your opinion, did Chris Hollingsworth intend to inflict great bodily harm on Ronald Greene?
Publicly, I've said I believe crimes have been committed. I said that today.
All right.
Because of the Code of Professional Responsibility, I am limited as to what I can say. That's about all I can say, because I don't want to jeopardize this case, a case that I want justice for the Greene family. I don't want to jeopardize that. And for me to answer that question would potentially jeopardize
All right.
the process.
So let's just, all right, good enough.
And I do have personal opinions, by the way.
That's right. I know you. That's right. And so let's do it this way. I'm going to tell you, in my opinion, I believe that he intended to inflict great bodily harm on Ronald Greene. Work with me on that. So now, we had, how many other officers were at the scene when Chris Hollingsworth inflicted that great bodily harm? That's my words, not yours. When he inflicted great bodily harm on Ronald Greene.
Again, because of the Code of Professional Responsibility.
I'm just asking how many officers,
I'm limited as to what I can say, and that would get into the weeds and details of that particular investigation, and I don't want to jeopardize the process.
No problem.
Because I want justice.
Let's just
for the
assume
Greene
that there
family.
were at least 3 other officers, and I'm going to say one of those officers was Kerry York, right? Let's just work with me. Now, if those officers were there, he committed this crime, just like you and I went to rob this bank. And maybe they didn't intend for him to inflict this great bodily harm or kill Ronald Greene, but it happened.
So the difference in your hypothesis is that you and I were involved in the first hypothesis, and so I can talk about you and I.
That's fine.
But the second hypothesis includes particular names of particular officers, and I am prevented from even making any type of comments or conclusions based upon your hypothesis.
That's all
of
right.
names individuals. I cannot name particular individuals, nor can I cite particular crimes, but I can say crimes have been committed, and that's about it.
I'm fine with that. So I think everybody gets the point. So if that happened, and even though maybe they didn't intend to do that, or I'll use a different example since we go that way. Let's say 4 officers arrived at a scene. One of the officers decides to beat a man, inflict great bodily harm on him, beat him to death. The other ones are there. Maybe they didn't necessarily intend, but they participate. And let's go a step further. They even participated by maybe dragging the guy after he was handcuffed and some other things, and did that. Now, work with me just for a second, because I got limited time here. They could hypothetically all be charged with the same crime, theoretically. Correct?
If there's conspiracy, yes.
Okay. So, now, I just want to take it a bit further. Now, and the reason why I ask you if you listen to my questioning of the colonel, when we were specifically talking about Doug Kane, he said his criteria for keeping him on staff was, and I'm paraphrasing this though, but his criteria was because he was not a danger to the public or himself. He said if I thought they were a danger to the public or themselves, then I would at least put them on administrative leave. Now, all I'm saying is, if somebody could possibly, if officers could possibly be charged with murder, and we already had Scott Brown said that he believes. Did you see Scott Brown's testimony last time?
Yes.
All right. And so you saw when he said to me that
the 5-minute mark, so wrap it up right here.
I'm getting very close here. That he was tortured and murdered.
Yes.
You heard that, right?
Yes.
So I guess my question to you would be, should officers that are in that position still be engaging with the public?
So, I'm the district attorney for the 3rd Judicial District, as you well know, and I run my office based upon my moral compass and the rules and regulations and policies that I have in place. I don't want to manage this Louisiana State Police because that's not what I do. That's Lieutenant Colonel Davis. That's his responsibility and his job. And I don't want to run his office for him.
That's fine. Look, here's my last deal, and I'm coming back to Doug Kane. You said that you had a difference of opinion as to whether charges should be filed or what the charges should be. Is that correct?
I think that's been made public, yes.
All right. And so was it a vehement disagreement, or was it?
I would say yes.
Okay. So I can assume that Doug Kane did not want charges or disagree with the charges that you listed that should have been filed against the officers.
We did not agree.
Okay. And then lastly,
I thought we just did lastly.
Well, this is lastly. You said that Colonel Reeves was not under investigation. You said that Colonel Davis was not under investigation, but you were silent as to whether Doug Kane was under investigation. Do you want to remain silent on that?
Well, I only know that he's under investigation with respect to IA within the Louisiana State Police. I do know there is an ongoing federal investigation involving the Louisiana State Police.
All right, I think that answers the question. All right, Representative Villio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning.
Good
Mr.
morning.
Belton. Pleasure to see you again.
Likewise.
And let me just say, I so appreciate your adherence to the rules of ethics, and I think that the members of this committee have to caution themselves to in no way jeopardize any
you.
future prosecution. As a former prosecutor, and for my colleagues, particularly, Rep. Nelson's not here. But I can assure Rep. Nelson and others that it is common practice to pause an investigation in favor of the U.S. Attorney's Office. You would agree you have concurrent jurisdiction, correct?
That is correct.
But it's a common courtesy, and the reason I know that so well as a prosecutor should be no surprise to anyone here how much I hated giving up my cases to the U.S. Attorney's Office when asked, because I wanted to try them myself.
Correct.
But it was a courtesy that was generally, if not always, extended, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. The only thing I have a question on, and I do appreciate the timeline as well, like my colleagues, and as the chairman established, the incident occurred May 10th, 2019. And I believe you testified that you received the file from State Police August 20th of 2019, correct?
That is correct.
Now, clearly this was a highly publicized event in your area, was it not?
At that time, it was not.
Was not.
In fact, I was not aware of it until September 19th. Although it was delivered to my office on August 20th of 2019, I was not aware and did not see the video until September 9th, 2019.
Okay. So in between that time, you did not, and this is what I want to establish, did you have any conversations with the governor or his staff?
During that time, no.
Okay.
The only phone call I made on that day was to the United States Department of Justice.
On what day? The September 10th, 2019?
September 9th.
2019, when you saw the video.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Because there was very little news articles about it.
Okay.
In fact, we even Googled and tried to find some news articles. There were very few, and it was not. It was not a headliner at that time.
I believe the initial article tracked the language of the text between Colonel Reeves and the governor. I believe it was in the Star. Is there a News Star or something?
Monroe News Star, yes.
Monroe News Star.
Correct. Right.
And according to your knowledge, that was pretty much the only article at the time?
Yes, that I can recall, yeah.
Because at that time, I think it was being purported that it was a traffic fatality, correct?
That's what I've been told.
Thank you. I appreciate your testimony.
And that's why I mentioned earlier in the forensic pathologist report, in the supplemental report, she removed that as a cause of his death.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Representative Bacala with a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When the video or the case file was delivered to you, or you first saw it on September 9th, did you actually reviewed everything on that day?
Yes.
Okay, so it wasn't just delivered and it sat on your desk. You grabbed it, you saw it, at least, and it was an incomplete investigation, we know today, correct? I mean,
that is
certain
correct.
videos, mm-hmm. But so what you saw was a partial report, I would guess, or an incomplete investigation, not by design, but by the fact that certain information was not discovered by the investigators who presented that report.
That's correct.
How long did it take you sitting down and look? And was somebody looking over your shoulder? Were y'all reviewing it together, or did you do it in private?
So it was myself, two of my prosecutors, or three other prosecutors, my first assistant, Lori James, my chief felony prosecutor, Lewis Jones, and one of my assistant DAs at that time, Clifford Strider.
So, yeah.
So we all looked at it together.
So this is DA's office. There's nobody in there but you and your employees.
And, well, the two investigators.
Okay, that's what I meant.
Albert Paxton, Trooper Paxton, and also Trooper Brown.
All right.
Were present, yes.
And How long did it take? I mean, it just like an hour and a half, 2 hours?
Oh, no, we were there
15
all
minutes?
day.
All day long.
Yes,
So all
yes.
day long you're looking at it. At the end of the day, was there any doubt in your mind that it couldn't end there with that meeting? Something had to take place. It had to go forward.
Absolutely.
So as a first-time guy looking at it, it was obvious. And look, we know law enforcement and prosecution is all about judgments, personal judgments. A jury is about a personal judgment whether they feel there's evidence sufficient. You feel you have a personal judgment. Would you say that anybody who reviewed that document, who is a reasonable person, could do anything but come to a conclusion that this is probably just doesn't? I'm trying to recognize your restriction, but anybody who saw that report and saw those videos, and not even counting the videos that weren't part of that report, it was obvious that this required further attention. You think any reasonable person would come to that conclusion?
It's the only conclusion in my mind that someone can come to.
And would you say that any reasonable person who would defend the actions out there based on what they saw, that they either didn't review it at all? I mean, could you find any and this isn't about guilt or innocence. This is about good police and bad policing. Okay, so I don't want to bring this into the criminal world. Is there any way, shape, or form you would use this as a training video about how to conduct police work?
Absolutely. This is a good training video.
About how not to do things, right?
Correct. And let me say this. My uncle, Joseph Belton, was one of the first African-American police officers in the little town I grew up in Evangeline Parish, Basil, Louisiana. And I fell in love with him and his service to our community. And I do respect and honor all of our police officers, men and women in uniform. They do a great job in protecting us. Unfortunately, there are bad actors in every profession, even the legal profession, as we well know. And so I want to make sure that is also said today.
Yes, sir. I agree with you.
But when there are bad actors, and there's a video of it, I think it's important. I'm not necessarily talking about any particular video, but yeah, any video where bad actors are.
Let me get to my
sure,
last
go
part of
ahead.
this thing
Yes.
before I get cut off.
Yes.
And based on that, based on the fact that any reasonable person looking at that video say this is wrong, this shouldn't happen, aside from the criminal side and trying to maneuver from evidence to a grand jury to a potential prosecution, I think anybody should also come to the conclusion is these people don't need to police another day till this is finalized. Would you agree?
So I think that I can say this.
I'm trying to point to a failure here that even if we take the criminal out, there's a failure to administratively act, whether it's by bad policy or indifference. I think there's a responsibility to act, to take even not the criminal side, to say, I'm sorry, buddy, you can't carry a gun anymore.
Yes,
I'm sorry,
I agree,
you can't chase speeders anymore.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying now. Yes,
I think that if the video is so obvious that as we established earlier, that something needs to happen here, whether it's poor policy or poor judgment or indifference. Could we agree that there should have been something happening for the year and a half that we were waiting on the criminal investigation to unfold? That you can call it disciplinary, you can call it whatever you want, administrative. I'm sorry, y'all can't do this for a while.
And your time's up on that question, but happy for you to answer.
Good.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would, if somebody would like to ask to follow up.
Yeah, you can ask a follow-up. I'm not trying to make it a hard five, but I'm just trying to make sure we keep the meeting going.
Well, I'll try to be as brief as I can. And I would say that failure is as egregious as the slowness of the investigation. I mean, if we got away, look, I was in the FBI National Academy. I was in training with police officers from around the world and around the country, and I remember meeting a guy from the Northeast, and he was talking about civil service, and he was telling a story about one of their employees who was indicted for murder, but they couldn't fire him because of civil service rules. I said, oh my God, could never happen in Louisiana. We had this argument. Well, I'm not sure it can't happen in Louisiana based on what we hear here. That we have people who are under criminal investigation for the most serious of crimes, who we say, I'm sorry, you're under criminal investigation, so we're not going to conduct an internal investigation until the criminal investigation is complete. So keep doing what you're doing for the next 2 or 3 years and until the feds get ready and to turn my DA loose, or till the feds take action. But till then, you're safe. And look, I know that's not completely accurate. I don't want to portray it as completely accurate, but it's certainly the feel that you get with some of this stuff, that we hide from IA because of criminal investigation. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Can I make a comment? I'm not in charge of Louisiana State Police, and I'm not in charge of IA investigations. That's Colonel Davis, and so it's not my office at all. But I understand what you're saying.
On that note, I do want to interject and ask you a couple questions. On the April 28th meeting where you meet, you're welcome. On the April 28th, 2021 meeting where you get shown the Clary video for the first time, what was the context of how they presented this new evidence? It wasn't new, but it was new to you evidence. Where they say, hey, we're checking around our servers and we found a new video that we didn't know about before. I mean, how was this shown to you, why you had not seen it yet, is what I'm trying to get at.
So I think that part of your question and that part of what happened is under investigation.
I understand. And
so as I respected your request to be here today, I would ask that you
totally
respect my position in that I cannot comment on those particular facts.
Sure. I understand that. Just trying to get a handle on it myself.
And I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Landry.
Hi, I just have a few timeline questions. Your the initial time that you saw the first video, September 2019, who reached out to you to set that up or to alert you to the video's existence?
Yes, so the very good question. So my office received, let me back up. So I have 2 parishes in my district. I have Lincoln Parish and Union Parish. The file was delivered to my Union Parish office. I spend more time in the Lincoln Parish office. And so there's a process, as you well know, in terms of intake. So once the file's received by, let's say, the receptionist or the legal secretary, it is then processed and then placed on a particular assistant district attorney's desk. Cliff Strider called me and said, John, I need to meet with you.
Could you say the name again?
My assistant district attorney, Cliff Strider.
Okay.
He called me. He said, I need to meet with you. We have a case here that you need to take a look at. Again, in reference to the Honorable Representative Villio's question, I did not know anything about it. It was not made very public in my area for whatever reason. So we set up a meeting, and for whatever reason, I had to cancel that meeting. He did not specifically say what was on the video. He just said it was disturbing. He did not explain who the video involved or anything.
This is your assistant DA
yes.
still?
Mm-hmm. At that time, I was president of the Louisiana District Attorney Association and on the board of the National DA Association. I'm very involved in the community as well. So for whatever reason, I was not able to meet with him immediately. He called again and said, well, let's set up a meeting. We set up a meeting for September 9th, which I think is about 3 weeks from the time that I received it in my office. And at that point, we discussed it. And I think he said that he had he was in contact, if I recall, with Miss Mona Harding or maybe one of her daughters. I'm not sure. But he said he was getting calls about it. And that's when we were able to meet that day, and it was very disturbing.
And do you know, or can you say who brought this information to him?
I don't know if it was, no, I do not know, no.
So we don't know if it was LSP or who from LSP?
I do know it was Louisiana State Police. I'm not sure which officer delivered it to our office.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And if you know, it was just delivered. I mean, usually stuff goes by email, electronic, or
It was hand delivered.
calling for a heads up? It was okay. Do you know? I mean, was there a call heads up, or I need to give this to you, or just was?
That I don't know. You're
Okay.
talking about from state police to my office?
Yeah, because
No,
I'm
that-
sure they bring you
right.
stuff regularly.
Yes, but they don't deal with me. They deal with an assistant or a staff member.
I see. Okay, so just to clarify, you don't know who from state police made the initial contact with your office.
I do not know. No.
Okay.
I'm sure I have that information, but I'm not. I can't tell you today who that
That's fine
was.
if you don't know. And then I heard you say at one point, I guess it was in communication with the U.S. Attorney's Office or DOJ, I'm not sure, that someone said, hold on, we'll be having indictments in September, October.
Yes.
Which office was that?
Department of the U.S. Attorney's Office
In Baton Rouge?
in Shreveport.
In Shreveport, I'm sorry. And when, do you remember when that conversation occurred?
Well, we've had several conversations.
Right.
There's yeah. So that we've had. I call quite a bit. Let me just put it that way.
Was that like, that would have been summer of 2020?
Summer of 20. Yes, summer of 20.
Spring, something like that?
Summer of 21.
So 2 years after the incident. Okay. Well, so clearly we don't have any indictments or anything yet. It's been 6 or 7 months since they gave the estimate. Has there been an updated estimate on indictments coming or anything?
No.
No.
But there, it's an ongoing investigation.
Correct.
And let me say this too, in defense of the U.S. Attorney's Office. A lot of times, the dates for the possible indictments, I would say possible, because there's no guarantee that that's going to happen with respect, even with the federal government. So I was told on numerous occasions that a new witness surfaced. So look, we need to turn over that rock. And so I get it.
Yeah.
And then as you dig deeper, another rock they have to turn over. And so
very deep pond here.
And as well as you
I
know,
think the members of this committee completely understand.
right. And so the federal government, as you know, is very detailed.
Right.
And so I understand that. And they
I'm
know
just
that
trying
I'm
to
very
find out.
anxious about getting to that point, and that's one of the reasons why U.S. Attorney Brandon Brown called me last week and said, John, I know you're frustrated. We all know you're frustrated, but we're going to go ahead and say, look, go with your case. Go ahead and initiate state proceedings.
Okay, and then when they asked you at some point to sort of stand down, was that in 19 or 20?
So that was in 20 because I made the phone call in 2019 of September.
And I apologize for all the memory issues.
But I understand that they didn't get the full file until sometime in February 2020.
Okay.
From the FBI.
And when you had, the sort of stand down
from state police. I'm sorry.
Right, conversation. Your office had already begun the process of investigating potential charges.
So we meet on a regular basis. In fact, we've met the last 3 days. This has been an ongoing deal in my office, and we're committed to bringing forth justice for the Greene family. And so, as you can tell in my timeline, we've never stopped. So
you've never stopped your investigation
into this, correct?
Knowing that it would come back to you eventually.
Correct.
Would that be the reason? Okay. Those are all my questions. Thanks.
Okay, sure.
Representative Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll be brief. D.A. Belton, thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you.
Just a couple quick questions, and to my colleague, Representative Villio's point, I don't want to do anything to impede on an active investigation, so if you can't answer my questions, just let me know.
Yes, sir.
I know that the federal government is probably looking into civil rights violations, but in my opinion, I think there may be some potential obstruction of justice violations by state troopers. Is your office investigating that? Can you tell me?
My office.
Potential obstruction of justice violations.
We're looking at everything.
Okay. And I also think there may be some conspiracy to destroy evidence as we look at the wiping of cell phones by state troopers. Is your office looking into that?
So that would depend on whether or not I have venue, and I don't think I have venue to pursue that charge.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr.
Venue
Chairman.
and our jurisdiction. Yeah.
Thank you, Representative Hughes. I did have a question. Now I forgot what it was. But there are no other questions for you at this time. I forgot what I was going to ask you. I apologize, but it happens, I guess. All right. Thank you, members. Is there any questions? All right, that's it. But hold on, Representative Billia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Belton, you mentioned Cliff Strider. If he's not watching, he's a dear friend, longtime friend. If you can please send him my regards.
I will. He told me.
Thank you.
In fact, I was with him on yesterday as well. So,
Representative Marcel.
I'm not sure if I heard you say the U.S. Attorney said that you could go ahead and proceed.
yes.
And when is that going to happen?
So I intend, once I receive the information that he promised from the Department of Justice.
Right. When do you think that you'll have that?
I can't give you a time frame, but I can say this: I'm moving swiftly.
You're moving swiftly.
Yes.
Okay.
And
Thank you very much.
I'd like to know the additional information they have gathered that I do not have, and I think that's important to move in moving forward. So,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your service.
All right, that concludes our agenda. But I would offer, since there's stuff about state police said, if Colonel Davis would like to come back and clarify anything that the U.S. Attorney General, the U.S. Attorney, the District Attorney said. He called me a judge. I upgraded his position as well. And Colonel, I'm just giving you the opportunity. I'm not trying to ask you more questions or anything like that. I don't want to feel like you ever getting short-sighted and not getting a chance to defend your organization.
No, I appreciate it. And no, I have nothing else to add. I mean, I've talked to DA Belton, and I have nothing more to offer. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.